Do you want to understand the Composition API? Do you want to know why Ref works the way it does? Do you want to see the Composition API used inside a real app? You are in luck. Today we've got Filip Rakowski from VueStorefront sharing all of that and way more with us. You can see what we're going to be doing on the side here, 7 sections today, and the timestamps are in the description below. So let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to a very special series. We are here today with Filip Rakowski from VueStorefront. And VueStorefront is it's like the #1 headless PWA. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Yeah, number headless PWA e-commerce app. And in this series, we're going to be showing you a lot of the concepts that are used in building the core of that. And so this is for all Vue developers, not just people interested in VueStorefront, although you should definitely go check that out too. And in the first one, we're going to be talking about the Composition API and how we use that to abstract just logic that would normally have gone somewhere else, but is much cleaner this way.
Yes. Hey, hello. It's great to be here. And as Jeffrey said, I will be showing some examples of Composition API usage we did in VueStorefront. So we started using Composition API in VueStorefront right after the plugin was released. So I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago. So I think we have a pretty decent experience, even though there are no good practices established and the community will need to embrace it. We have already seen that Composition API is simplifying a lot of things to us, and it's basically completely changing the way how we are writing the applications. So I thought I would share with you everything we already have learned.
Awesome. And for that, we've got a simple example app that we've set up that will show us the concepts really simply. And then we'll be looking at some code in the actual VueStorefront app to see a real-life example.
Yes. So just to guide you through the application that we will be working on today, this is very simple, and we have actually only 5 files in here. So the entry point, main.js, this is actually containing our router, Vue router, and also a Composition API plugin for Vue 2, which is actually bringing capabilities of Composition API from Vue 3 into Vue 2.
At this point, we had a 4-minute conversation about the differences between the Composition API in Vue 2 and Vue 3. The gist of it is that there are a couple gotchas with the Vue 2 Composition API plugin that are not there in Vue 3. But if you want to know more, we have the entire conversation available as a bonus episode on the Vue Screencast website. And now back to our conversation.
And so here we have a router. Here we are registering the router. And we have 2 routes. So the first one is home, and the second one is protected. We have this main.js file, which we already have discussed. Then we have our application entry point, like the root component, which contains a header and the router view. So in router view, we'll be displaying the pages from Vue router that are here.
Mm-hmm.
And those pages are home, which is just saying hello Vue screencasts. And this is what we already see in the screen. And the second one is protected. So what the protected view is doing, it's actually displaying you some message only when you are logged in. So if you're not logged in, you see an information that you need to log in. And if you are logged in, you're seeing super secret content. For now, the isLoggedIn variable is hard-coded. And also in header, we're also relying on this isLoggedIn message, and it's also hard-coded. So if we are logged in, we are seeing hello user, and if you're not logged in, we are seeing please log in, as well as a button, which is actually enabling us to log in, and run login method, which is not implemented yet. So this is our application. Yes?
Yeah, that is logged in state is something that we're eventually going to be putting into a composable so it can be shared.
Yes. Yes. But
All right.
we will start small. So we will start with actually implementing this login logic inside header with Composition API.
Awesome.
So let me start. The first thing, obviously, that we need to do is not make this isLoggedIn variable hard-coded. So what we will do is we will import a ref function from Vue Composition API plugin. We will use this ref function to create a reactive reference. Why we actually need this ref? So we could do something like this. We could do const is logged in equals false. And then, we can just
put it in the setup function, I think.
This is what I have done. Yes. We can just put it into the setup method and we could just return it. But what is the problem with this? So if I will have this login method.
Yeah, let's actually go ahead and show that.
And inside this login method, I will just change isLoggedIn value to true. Of course, that needs to be let right now. And then I will expose it to the template because everything that is returned by the setup function is exposed to the template. And I will comment this out so my ESLint won't fail. Okay, so when we click login button, nothing happens. And why nothing happens? Because even though the value of this variable has changed, it's not reflected in the UI because this variable is not reactive. So how to make it reactive? How to make the UI and the reactivity system of Vue.js react to this change? So Composition API is bringing us a reactive property. And reactive property is basically doing exactly the same what Vue observable was doing previously. So it's creating a reactive reference to an object that is then tracked by Vue reactivity system. So
if someone was using Vue observable before, then they should replace it with reactive.
Yes, I'm almost sure that they will get rid of Vue observable in Vue 3. Probably it will still work in compatibility build, but generally I think it will be removed. It's not like 100% sure information. It's like 93%, something like this.
All right.
So what we could do here. So what we need to pass into reactive is an object. So actually we need to make our whole state reactive. So let's do this. Let's state equals false. And we'll use reactive. And inside this reactive, I will have is logged in defaulting to false. Then when I want to change it with login method, I will update the state that is logged in to true. And then I will return a state object. I will also change here, change here. I will save. And moment of truth. It worked.
All right.
So this is how we can actually create reactive properties within Composition API. But to be honest, this is not giving us as much in comparison to Vue 2.6, because every time we want to track a primitive, we would need to close it into an object. And we could run into multiple issues with that. For example, let's say we have multiple properties in our code
Mhm.
So let's say we have user, we have dishwasher, and stuff like that. So each of these pieces actually has its own context. And when you want to group code, you would like to, for example, group things related to user in the same place, things related to dishwasher in the same place. We don't want to group them all together because they are not responsible for the same thing. And when we'll be when we'll be deleting some code or when we'll be maintaining some code, we want to maintain things that are working together. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what would be best is if we could somehow split this object into multiple objects. And one way of doing this is using Reactive to create multiple objects.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not very elegant. And what Vue came up with is a ref object, ref function. So what ref function is doing? Ref function is actually enabling us to create a reactive property from an object, because the whole idea behind this reactivity is because this is an object and JavaScript proxy, so something that is under the hood of Vue.js reactivity system, it can track changes only for objects. So if we have a primitive like this, it actually can't track these changes, as you have
But
seen.
with ref, then we somehow work around that.
Yes. So how does it look like? How does it work like, actually? When we are creating a reference of a primitive value, what this reference is actually doing is it's wrapping it into an object. So the reactivity system can track it. And this is the only thing that ref function is actually doing. So it's transforming ref false to something that looks like this, to an object that has a one property value. And because it transformed a primitive into an object, we can track it.
Mm-hmm. And so that's why we need to do dot value when we're using it in JavaScript.
Yes, there are some caveats of this. First of all, I can change it to const. Second one, whenever I want to change the value of a reactive reference, I'm actually referring to this value property. And this is really, really important because this is how we are keeping the reactivity of this. Because if we override the whole object, then you can say that reactivity system has resetted. So we can't track changes of this object in the other places. We're basically creating a completely new reactive reference. So it's very important to always update the value, not the whole object.
Yeah, and when you're referencing it within the JavaScript, you also have to use dot value, right?
Yes, but only within JavaScript. So the good thing is,
template.
No, when I am passing this to the template, then I don't need to use dot value, and this is really cool. So if I will save this and refresh, I really hope it will still work. And it still works.
Yay.
The problem is that if I will go to my protected page and I will change the value of logged in here, it doesn't make any changes to this page, yes? Because this is hard-coded here.
Right.
So we need a way to actually synchronize those variables between each other.
Yeah, and in the past, Vuex would have been a really common solution to this.
Yes, yes. In Vuex, that would be a really common solution. We just create a store and share this variable between two components, or three components, or at some point 300 components. I really hope you don't run into 300 components. So how
now with
would
Composition API?
Yes, now with Composition API, it's much simpler, and we could approach this in many ways, actually, but what the React community has embraced And what Vue community is embracing as well is in React, we had something called hooks.
Mm-hmm.
And hook was basically a function that was using this composition API from React, which wasn't reactive, but basically that was a way of encapsulating the logic, this logic, into a separate function. And in Vue, it's much more powerful because what we have in those functions is also reactive. So let's do this. Let's move this logic into a separate function. We will call it use user.
All right. Yeah. And
this is a convention from React. Yes.
Yeah, the convention is have use and then another word.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a convention from React, and as we have seen, Vue.js is also embracing it. So I will create a new file and call it use user.js. And then I will come back to my header. I will copy this logic, and I will do export default function user. I will copy this. I will import ref from Vue composition API. And this function needs to return something. Yes? Yep. So it needs to return is logged in. And it needs to return login. Yes?
Yep.
Now, in my header function, instead of having this logic here, what I could do is just import, and that was a default import, use user from use user. And in my code, I can do const, and that was logged in, and is logged in. So I'm using the structuring to return those two variables.
Yep.
And then I'm returning them to the view.
Right. And what this means so far is that login and is logged in, you can use them in any component.
Yes, we have just externalized this small piece of business logic. And this is one of the main reasons why they have introduced Composition API, because it's a great way actually of sharing business logic between components. So previously we had scope slots, we had mixings. I think everyone who have worked with them know their drawbacks. So Composition API is kind of like a solution that combines best from both worlds. And I really, really love it. But apart from this, it also has a lot of different benefits. But we'll jump to them shortly.
Yes. Yeah. First, let's see that this is still working.
Yeah, that's always a mystery. Okay, so let's refresh. Let's click login. Yes, it's working. I'm always happy when my code is working, even the simplest one. As you have seen, we have just externalized this. So if we have externalized this, then we should be able to use it also in our protected view, yes?
Yeah.
So let's do this. Import use user from use user. Whoa. From use user. Then in setup, I'm pasting this. I don't need a login method at all in here, so I'm just using logged in. I'm saving, and what would you expect? Would that work?
You would hope so, but
even though it works, it's not propagated into into the page. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because this state is not shared. And to understand like why it's not shared, we need to understand what happens when we are invoking this use user. So what is happening actually is that function, whenever it runs, it creates new instance of isLoggedIn variable. Okay, so to better illustrate this concept, I will invoke this once more and just change the name of this variable. So we still have this login function that is changing isLoggedIn.
Mm-hmm. So is logged in too. That works.
Okay, and I will pass this as well. And I will, in a very ugly way, just display this along with the initial one. So both are false. And
right.
when I click login, you see it's changing only the isLoggedIn from this function. So another login and logged in are not the same variables, because every time I invoke this function, I'm creating a new scope.
Mm-hmm. So is there a way to get it outside of that scope?
Yes, and it's a very simple way, actually. So the only thing that we need to do is in our composition API function,
mm-hmm.
whenever we run it, because we are creating this variable inside this function, then it's created every time we run it. But if we will take it outside, then it will be created only once and shared. But I think you already know into which issue we'll run if we will do this.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to also do this.
And once again, this does not apply to Vue 3. You won't need these extra lines there.
Exactly, because there won't be a plugin at all. Vue.use, Vue composition API. Okay. Let's refresh and see if it works. Yay!
Hey. And it works in
work,
protected
and also
too.
our page works. Yes. Our
Awesome.
protected page, because we are already using this. So let's remove this unnecessary code from it.
Mm-hmm.
Save it. Click, and it works. So this is a very, very simple way to actually share the code between each instance of Composable. And this is very useful because we don't always want to have a separate instances. In VueStorefront, for example, we also have a user. So obviously, we don't want to fetch the user data each time we're invoking this, because usually we are doing it only once. The same applies to user card. Whenever you're using a card, you expect it to always be the same instance of the card. So if I will add a product on one page, I want this product to be also present in another page. So there are many applications of this pattern when this might be useful, and there are also many applications when we should keep this state inside. For example, when we would like to keep it inside, let's say we want to fetch some blog posts.
All right.
So to use this, I will create a function called use blog or use post. Post. And inside this function, I would declare a post, which would be a reference to an object that is empty right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I would also need to import ref from Vue Composition API, and I will need to create a search method, which will basically, it could be also, let's call it search posts or fetch posts, however you want to call this.
So that'll return multiple posts.
Yeah, clever. It should return a single post. Okay, so what that would do?
Find post.
Fetch post.
Oh yeah, that works too.
Okay, so let's call it fetch post. And what we will do here is actually we will use a JSON placeholder. So I'm not sure if you know this page, but basically JSON placeholder is basically a page that lets you to do REST API calls and get some placeholder data. So they have different types of data to fetch, so posts, comments, albums, photos, etc. So we'll be using posts. So I will copy this. Await fetch this / posts plus some ID. Yes.
And we need to make this function async, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay.
All right.
So first I'm doing this, then I'm reassigning result of that. Post that value equals response that JSON, and I also need to await this. So then the response object is transferred into a JSON, and then I would return that. So I will return post, and I would return fetch post.
Okay, so we've got the post and the fetch post, and now we need to use our use post composition function.
Yes. So let's say we have our blog behind a really cool paywall, because everyone loves paywalls, especially medium users. So we will display our posts in protected view. So only for logged in users that are paying for our subscription. So I'm importing use post from use post. Then I am invoking it. Post. And what I want from this is post. So obviously I want post. And obviously I want fetch post method that will fetch the post. And the post is something I want to display in the view. Here. And fetch post is a method I want to actually invoke here. And here is the difference between Vue 2 and Vue 3. Normally, what I would do in Vue 3 is I would write async setup, and then I would await fetch post with some ID. Let's say that ID would be 1. And until this is loaded, nothing will be displayed. But unfortunately, we can't do this in Vue 2 because of the limitations of the Vue 2 APIs. What we could do, it will display a placeholder before this content is fetched. In our case, placeholder is empty object.
Okay, yeah.
We have this fetch post here with ID 1, and let's see what happens when you click login. We see the post. Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, so that was a great application of the concept when we want to have this state scoped to a specific composition API function. Because we don't want to share it, we would like to use this use post in many different places, and every time we probably want a different post. We don't want this post object to be shared.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me show this how we implemented actually this pattern in VueStorefront. So, in VueStorefront, as you see, we have very, very similar patterns. We also have functions that are responsible for interacting with certain data entities, like use card, use category, use locale, use product, use user, similarly to what we have here. And we are even interacting with those functions in a very similar way. So, for example, we have this use product factory.ts. Don't bother the factory part. We'll jump into that a little bit later. This is actually our way of making it possible to create multiple variants of use product function, but don't bother with it right now. Think only about this part. So as you can see, use product is responsible for displaying products. And we can use it this way. Const product and search equals this product. And the same way as we did before, we are invoking a search method with some parameters. For example, it could be product ID, and it's populating the products variable. What we already also have it is a loading property that changes when we start fetching the product and when we finish fetching the product. So we can display, for example, a loader in the UI. This is also like very cool idea. And what we also have done, and we haven't shown it into in our previous examples, is that we are not displaying references. We are not returning references directly. What we are returning is we're returning computed properties. And why we are doing this? To avoid unnecessary reassignments. So all of these properties can be modified only inside this function.
Oh, that is cool. So it's purely reactive.
Yes, we can do something like this, because then the console will yell, because this is a read-only computed property. And actually, Vue Composition API has something like read-only property from Vue Composition API. So it works exactly the same. I just used computed because I found it like a little bit more readable to newcomers that have a background in Vue 2.
Yeah. And now the users don't need to use .value when they're using products or total products.
Actually, they need, because computed property is returning also a ref that is read-only, as you see here.
So even though it's returning products.value, you still need to call .value on that?
Yes, I still need to call .value on that.
Okay.
And if you will take a look at example, how we use that, for example, in our team, pages, product, this is exactly what we are doing. So we have a product. Then we have a computed property that is basically filtering those products, and we are referring to this via products value. So this is another computed property, yes?
Yeah.
And from this computed property, we're also extracting some other properties, because this is a product page. So in product page, actually, when we're invoking a search method, we are invoking it with a single ID. So this is fetching a single product, yes? This is why we have this variable product, because what this is doing is actually taking the first product from this array, because it's not only fetching a single product, but also all the variants of this product. So we are fetching the so-called master variant, so a default configuration that you will see when you enter the page. For example, let's say default configuration is when the t-shirt is blue and medium size. So this is what you will see at the beginning. The rest of the array, this array, is actually holding
the variations.
Yes. And we are reassigning we are reassigning the product value whenever we change the configuration. So here we are making a computed property with this product, and here we are also getting the current configuration from this particular product. And we have a getter for this function to make it simpler, so we're just putting a product in here and saying which configurable properties you want to display.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be an application of a local state, because again, if we'll come back here, this use product factory, we see that whenever we invoke use product, we are creating a new instance for products, products object, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you could call two different products and they would have different loading and you could reference them separately.
Yes, exactly. For example, you can do this to show related products, for example. So first we are fetching the product, and then based on this product, we are fetching related products to this product. We are actually even doing this, but we're doing this in a different component, so it doesn't look so clean. And also there are things that we would like to have unified. So there are things that we want to have only a single instance of in our application. For example, a user. Whenever we are logged in, we want to see the content for logged in users. Exactly the same as we have seen in our previous example. So here we have this use user factory. And use user factory, as you see, it's not creating actually a new instances of user, for example. We are creating this before, and every time we run use user, it's using a reference to the same value we have created at the beginning. So this is created only once.
Right, so that'll be a global user.
Yes, and every composition API function use user is always returning a reference to this user.
Right,
Also,
so you can't change it directly.
Yes. So I think that would be it about the applications of this pattern in VueStorefront. And I really hope you found it useful. I think we are one of the first to experiment, so we're also one of the first to share stupid ideas. But I really
the ideas you shared today are pretty great.
Yeah, I really found that useful, and it also simplified the state management in our case a lot, because even though we have a pretty complex application, we are not using Vux at all. We are only using these composition functions, and when we needed something that is not tied to a specific business logic functionality, I'd say, that is more local to a team, for example, something called UI state, we also did that with Composition API.
And that is it for today's video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Go ahead and tell us how you're using the Composition API or plan to use the Composition API. And there is 3 bonus lessons only available on VueScreencast.com. There's stuff that really interesting, but a little bit of a tangent from what we are primarily talking about. So go check those out, VueScreencast.com. We also have expert mentoring and consulting available. See you soon, and keep learning.